My parents drained the inheritance my grandmother left me to buy my sister a shiny new car while Grandma lay dying in hospice. They assumed a 79-year-old woman was too weak to notice the theft. They thought I would stay silent, just like always, but they forgot that my grandmother did not need to stand up to burn their world down. She only needed to dial one specific number. My name is Violet Ross, and for 34 years, I have lived my life in the polite, suffocating shadow of Cedar Hollow, North Carolina. It is the kind of town where the hydrangeas are always manicured, the fences are always freshly painted white, and the secrets are buried deep under the floorboards of colonial-style houses. I learned early on that in Cedar Hollow, appearance is the only currency that matters, and by the standards of the Ross family, I have always been practically bankrupt. I work as the program manager at Riverton Arts Outreach, a nonprofit organization that tries to bring a little color to the underprivileged corners of the county. It is noble work, or so I tell myself when the paycheck clears. But noble work does not pay down student loans or cover the rising cost of living in a town trying to price out its own middle class. That is why, 3 nights a week, I trade my manager's blazer for a worn cardigan and drive to the homes of wealthy strangers to teach their indifferent children how to play the violin or the piano. I teach them scales and arpeggios, listening to the hollow sound of dutiful practice while their parents sit in the next room, drinking wine and complaining about the cost of private schools. I am tired. I am always tired. But debt is a quiet, constant companion, and I have never been one to ask for help. My husband, Terry Bridges, is the only reason I have not completely unraveled. Terry is the anchor to my drifting ship. He works in risk control for a regional financial firm, a job that suits him perfectly because he sees the world in spreadsheets and probabilities. He is calm, practical, and possesses a stillness that I envy, while I am a bundle of frayed nerves and suppressed artistic temperament. Terry is solid ground. He knows that my family is a minefield. Though I rarely speak of them in detail, I carry the shame of my lineage like a heavy coat I cannot quite take off. I keep Terry separated from them as much as possible. Not because I'm afraid of what they will do to him, Terry can handle himself, but because I am afraid of what he will think of me when he sees how small I become in their presence. To my parents, Grant and Lorna Ross, I am a glitch in their otherwise perfect programming. My father, Grant, is a man who believes that a firm handshake and a loud voice are substitutes for character. He has spent his life chasing status, trying to turn the Ross name into something synonymous with old money, even though our money was never quite old enough or vast enough to truly matter to the elites of Cedar Hollow. My mother, Lorna, is his perfect accomplice. She is a woman who treats motherhood like a public relations campaign. She loves the idea of having children, provided those children reflect well on her during Sunday brunch at the club. And then there is Sloan. Sloan Ross is 28 years old, 6 years my junior, and the undisputed sun around which my parents orbit. If I am the glitch, Sloan is the feature presentation. She is beautiful in that polished, high-maintenance way that requires significant investment. She has never worked a job that she did not quit within 3 months because of toxic energy, yet she drives a better car than I do and lives in a condo my parents helped secure. She thrives on the gaze of others. She feeds on priority. In the ecosystem of our family, Sloan is the predator who eats first, and I am the scavenger, grateful for the scraps. There was only one person who ever looked at the Ross family portrait and saw the cracks in the frame. My grandmother, June Caldwell. Grandma June is 79 years old, a woman made of iron and menthol cigarettes. Though she quit smoking 20 years ago, she has a sharp tongue and eyes that miss nothing. When I was a child, and my mother would sigh loudly about my frizzy hair or my inability to charm the neighbors, Grandma June would pull me onto her lap and tell me that character was worth more than charm. She was the only one who didn't look through me. She saw me. I remember a rainy afternoon 3 years ago, sitting in her study, the room smelling of old paper and dust. She had pulled a heavy metal box from her safe and looked me dead in the eye. "Violet," she had said, her voice raspy but firm. "I have put something aside for you, a separate account. It is not a fortune. It is not enough to buy an island, but it is enough." "Enough for what, Grandma?" I had asked. "Enough to have a door," she answered. "A way out. If Grant and Lorna ever try to squeeze the life out of you, or if you just need to breathe, this is yours. I have set it up so you do not have to beg them for a single dime. You are the responsible one, Violet. You are the one who actually works. I want to make sure you have a cushion when the world gets hard." I had cried then. Not because of the money, though God knows. With my student loans and the mortgage on our small townhouse, the money would have been life-changing, but because of the acknowledgement. For 34 years, I had been told implicitly and explicitly that I did not generate value. My parents measured worth in social connections and marriage prospects. Grandma June measured it in integrity. That promise of the inheritance was my secret armor. It wasn't just cash. It was proof that someone loved me enough to protect me. I never asked for the money. I never touched it. I just liked knowing it was there. Like a lighthouse in the distance while I navigated the choppy waters of my daily life. I told myself I didn't need much. I just wanted fairness. I wanted the minimum amount of respect due to a human being. But if I am being honest with myself, standing there in the kitchen of my own home, a part of me was still a desperate little girl waiting for my father to look at me with the same pride he reserved for Sloane. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to realize that while Sloane needed their help to survive, I had built a life with my own 2 hands. I was foolish. I was so incredibly foolish. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of mundane, gray Tuesday that blends into every other day of the week. I had just come home from a particularly grueling session with a 10-year-old who refused to cut his fingernails, making the violin screech like a dying cat. Terry was in the kitchen, the warmth of the oven fogging up the windows. He was making a roast chicken, the smell of thyme and lemon filling the small space. It was domestic. It was safe. Terry was chopping carrots with the precision he applied to his risk analysis reports, the knife hitting the cutting board in a rhythmic, comforting thwack, thwack, thwack. I was leaning against the counter, closing my eyes, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. "I think I need to drop the Tuesday student," I said, rubbing my temples. "Mrs. Gable actually asked me if I could lower my rate because they are renovating the pool house," Terry snorted, not looking up from the carrots. "Tell her your rate goes up 10% for every renovation she mentions. Risk premium." I smiled, opening my mouth to reply, to joke about how Mrs. Gable would probably try to pay me in exposure or leftover catering sandwiches. But the ringtone of my phone sliced through the air. It was the default ringtone. I had never assigned a special tone to my father because, honestly, he called me so rarely that it didn't seem worth the effort when I saw the name Dad flashing on the screen. My stomach did that familiar, involuntary flip-a reflex of anxiety honed over 3 decades. Terry stopped chopping. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. He knew the effect Grant Ross had on me. "Do you want me to get that?" he asked. "No," I said, straightening up and clearing my throat. "It's fine. Maybe it's important." I swiped the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello." "Violet?" No greeting. No how are you? Just my name. Spoken with the clipped efficiency of a man ordering a steak. "Grandma June is being transferred to Hospice. Blue Ridge Haven. Be there in 1 hour." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What?" I stammered, gripping the edge of the granite counter. "Hospice. But I thought she was just going in for observation. Mom said it was just a medication adjustment. The doctors say it is heart failure. Violet, don't be dramatic. Just get there. 1 hour. We need to present a united front for the doctors and the staff." "Is she conscious?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Dad, is she awake?" "She is in and out," he said, his tone bored, as if discussing a minor inconvenience in his schedule. "Just get there. And don't bring that old car of yours to the front entrance. Park in the back lot. We don't want to clutter the driveway." The line went dead. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the silence humming with the brutality of his indifference. Hospice. Grandma June was dying. The only person who saw me was dying, and my father was worried about where I parked my car. Violet. Terry was beside me instantly, his hands on my shoulders, grounding me. "Honey, what is it?" "Is it June?" "She's moving to hospice," I whispered, the tears hot and sudden in my eyes. "Blue Ridge Haven. He said it's heart failure." Terry didn't waste time asking questions. He untied his apron and tossed it onto the counter. "Okay, go. Do you want me to drive?" I shook my head. "No, you stay. Finish dinner. I need a minute with her alone if I can get it. If you come, my mother will spend the whole time performing for you, trying to act like the grieving daughter. I can't handle her theatrics right now. I just need to see Grandma." "Are you sure?" Terry asked, his eyes searching mine. "I'm sure," I lied. I wasn't sure of anything except that I felt like the floor was dissolving. "I'll text you when I get there." I grabbed my keys and my purse, fleeing the warmth of my kitchen for the cool, damp air of the evening. My car was a 5-year-old sedan, reliable but unglamorous, with a dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot hit and run 2 years ago. I merged onto the highway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The road to Blue Ridge Haven wound through the wealthy hills outside of town, a landscape of rolling lawns and gated driveways. My mind raced. I thought of the last time I saw Grandma. 2 weeks ago. She had looked frail, her skin like parchment paper, but her eyes were still bright. She had squeezed my hand and told me not to let the bastards grind me down. I hadn't realized that was a goodbye. I hadn't realized she knew she was leaving. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down, risking a look away from the winding road. It was a text message from Sloan. "Sis, please try to dress appropriately for once. We are meeting the palliative care director. Don't make us ashamed." I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. My grandmother was dying, and Sloan was worried about my wardrobe. It was so perfectly, violently Ross that I almost laughed. I looked down at my outfit, black slacks, and a simple gray blouse I had worn to work. It was respectful. It was clean. But to Sloan and my mother, anything that didn't scream money was an insult. I didn't reply. I threw the phone back onto the passenger seat and pressed the accelerator. 10 minutes later, the illuminated sign for Blue Ridge Haven appeared out of the darkness. It looked less like a medical facility and more like a country club, with stone pillars and tasteful landscaping lit by uplights. I turned into the driveway, ignoring my father's instruction to park in the back. I pulled my dented sedan right up to the visitor lot near the main entrance, parking next to a line of pristine SUVs. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for a moment. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and frightened. "Just get in there," I whispered to myself. "Just go see her. Ignore them. Ignore Dad. Ignore Mom. Ignore Sloan. You are here for Grandma. You are here to say goodbye." I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the inevitable criticism that waited inside. I thought I knew what I was walking into. I thought I was walking into a room of grief. However performative it might be on their part, I thought I was walking into a tragedy. I had no idea I was walking into a crime scene. I stepped out of the car, the cool wind biting through my thin blouse. I walked toward the automatic glass doors, my heart heavy with sorrow, clutching the memory of Grandma's promise like a lifeline. The escape hatch. She had called it. The door. I didn't know yet that the door had already been kicked in, the room ransacked, and the safety net slashed to ribbons. I didn't know that while I was teaching scales to pay my electric bill, my family had been busy ensuring that my escape hatch was welded shut. I walked into the lobby, the smell of antiseptic and expensive floral arrangements hitting me instantly. I was just a granddaughter coming to hold a dying woman's hand. I was so naive. I thought the worst thing that could happen tonight was death. I was wrong. The worst thing was betrayal, and it was waiting for me in room 304. The waiting area outside the palliative care wing of Blue Ridge Haven looked less like a hospital and more like the lobby of a high-end law firm. The carpet was a plush, muted gray that swallowed the sound of footsteps, and the lighting was tastefully recessed, casting no shadows. But the temperature was arctic. It felt as though the air conditioning had been set to preserve bodies rather than comfort the living. I spotted my family immediately. They were arranged in the seating alcove like a tableau of bored aristocrats waiting for a delayed flight. My father, Grant Ross, stood by the window, his back to the room. His arms were crossed over his chest, straining the fabric of his navy blazer. He was not looking at the manicured gardens outside. He was staring at his reflection in the glass, checking the knot of his tie. My mother, Lorna, sat on the edge of a leather armchair, clutching her beige designer handbag with both hands as if she were afraid someone in this hospice might try to snatch it. Her posture was rigid, her spine not touching the back of the chair. And then there was Sloane. My younger sister was sprawled on a love seat, her legs crossed at the ankles, the blue light of her smartphone illuminating her perfectly contoured face. Her thumb moved rhythmically, scrolling, tapping, scrolling. I walked toward them, my heels clicking on the hard floor that bordered the carpet. I expected someone to look up. I expected a nod, a grimace, perhaps a shared look of concern given that the matriarch of our family was dying a few doors down. No one moved. No one looked at me. It was as if I were invisible, a ghost haunting the wrong hallway. "I'm here," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the hushed space. Grant turned slowly. He did not offer a hug. He did not ask if I was okay after driving halfway across the county in a panic. He simply glanced at his wristwatch, a heavy gold piece that cost more than my car, and frowned. "You took your time," he said. "I came as soon as you called," I replied, fighting the urge to apologize. I had nothing to apologize for. "How is she? Is she conscious?" Grant ignored the question. He gestured for me to sit, but he didn't wait for me to do so before he started speaking. It wasn't a conversation. It was a briefing. He spoke with the clipped, authoritative tone of a project manager dealing with a logistical bottleneck. "Here is the situation," Grant said, looking between me and my mother, though mostly at the air above my head. "The doctors say it is a matter of time. Could be days, could be a week. We need to manage this transition smoothly. Appearances, as you know, are critical right now." He paused, waiting for agreement. Lorna nodded solemnly. Sloane didn't look up from her phone. "I have looked at the schedule," Grant continued, as if death were something that could be put into a spreadsheet. "Lorna has the charity gala committee meetings all week. We cannot have her dropping out. It would look like weakness. And people talk. We need to maintain the family image of stability." He turned his gaze to Sloane. "And Sloane is in a very delicate phase with Miles. The Ketters are hosting their annual mixer this weekend. It is crucial she's available for that. We are close to locking down an engagement there, and we cannot let a family medical issue derail the momentum with the Ketter estate." I stared at him. "Momentum," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Dad, Grandma is dying. She isn't a scheduling conflict." Grant's eyes snapped to mine, cold and hard as flint. "Do not be dramatic, Violet. We are dealing with reality, and the reality is, someone needs to be here to monitor the situation daily, to be the presence." He pointed a finger at me. "That is going to be you." "Me?" I asked, though I wasn't surprised. "Your schedule is flexible," Grant said, choosing the word with a sneer that implied unimportant. "You work at that nonprofit. You teach those little music lessons. It is hardly a corporate career. You can shift things around. We need you here every afternoon and evening until the end." I looked at Lorna. "Mom, you're not going to be here." Lorna finally looked at me, her expression pained, but not for the reasons I hoped. "Violet, please, you know how demanding the committee is. Besides, hospitals drain me. I am an empath. You know that. I pick up on negative energy. I just cannot handle the atmosphere for long periods. You are stronger in that way. You are more sturdy. Sturdy. It was a code word. In the Ross Dictionary, sturdy meant unremarkable. Sloane was delicate, precious, a flower to be protected. I was the mule to be loaded. And Miles is taking me to look at venues on Thursday, Sloane chimed in, her voice sounding bored. She finally looked up, her eyes scanning my outfit with critical disdain. The Ketters are very particular about reliability. If I start flaking on plans to sit in a hospital room, his mother will think I'm high maintenance, or worse, depressing. Miles Ketter, I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. The guy who thinks summer is a verb. You are prioritizing his mother's opinion over your own grandmother. Watch it, Grant snapped. The Ketter family owns half the commercial real estate in this county. An alliance with them secures Sloane's future, and ours. You will do this, Violet. You will be here. It is the least you can do. I looked at the three of them. The wall of indifference was impenetrable. They weren't asking me for a favor. They were assigning me a shift. And the sick part was, I wanted to be there. I wanted to be with Grandma June. I didn't want her to be alone with these vultures, but I hated that they used my love for her as a tool to free up their social calendars. Fine, I said, my voice quiet. I will be here, every day. I'll clear my schedule. Good, Grant said, checking his watch again. That is settled then. Effective resource allocation. I turned to walk toward the double doors leading to the patient rooms. As I turned my back, I heard my mother lean in toward my father. She thought she was whispering, but the acoustics of the empty waiting room carried her voice straight to my ears. Well, Lorna murmured, at least she is useful for something. I froze for a fraction of a second. The insult landed exactly where she meant it to, right in the center of my chest. Useful, not loved, not valued, just a utility, like a dishwasher or a lawnmower. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forced my legs to keep moving, and pushed through the heavy doors into the hallway. The transition was instant. The hallway smelled of antiseptic, but as I approached room 304, the scent changed. The sterile hospital odor gave way to something warmer. Something that smelled of peppermint oil and old, dusty paper. It was Grandma June's scent. Even here, in this place of endings, she had managed to imprint herself on the atmosphere. I pushed the door open gently. The room was dim, lit only by the monitors and a small bedside lamp. Grandma lay in the bed, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her silver hair was spread thin against the pillow, and her breathing was shallow, a rhythmic rasp that filled the silence. I pulled a plastic chair close to the bed and sat down. Taking her hand, her skin felt like parchment, dry and fragile. "Grandma," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered, slowly, painfully. She opened her eyes. They were cloudy, milky with age and medication. But when they found my face, a spark of recognition flared. She squeezed my hand, a weak, trembling pressure, but it was there. "Violet," she breathed. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. "You came." "Of course I came," I said, forcing a smile, blinking back tears. "I'm here." She stared at me for a long moment, her gaze intense. It was the look of a person who had spent a lifetime surrounded by masks and was finally looking at a real face. "You are the only one," she whispered. "The only one who tells the truth." "Don't talk," I said softly. "Save your strength." She shook her head slightly on the pillow. "No time for saving. Listen to me." She pulled my hand closer to her chest. "The money, the account. You remember?" "I remember," I said. "Grandma, please, we don't need to talk about money." "We do," she insisted, her voice gaining a sudden, desperate edge. "That amount, it is yours, not for fancy things. Not for show, it is for freedom. So you don't have to beg them, ever. Promise me you know that." "I know," I said, a tear finally escaping and tracking down my cheek. "I promise. It's safe. It's waiting." She relaxed then, closing her eyes as if a weight had been lifted. Good girl. My brave girl." We sat in silence for 10 minutes, just breathing together. It was the most peace I had felt all day. But the peace was shattered when the door banged open. Grant marched in, followed by a weary-looking nurse. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at the clipboard in the nurse's hand. "I need to verify the paperwork," Grant was saying, his voice booming in the small room. "The power of attorney documents I submitted last year. Are they active in the current system? I need to be sure there are no bureaucratic holdups if we need to make financial decisions regarding her care." The nurse looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Ross, your mother is resting. The medical chart indicates she is stable for the moment. Her oxygen levels are—" "I am not asking about her oxygen," Grant interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "I am asking about the authorization, the legal access. Is it cleared? Can I sign for the billing and the asset management immediately?" I sat frozen in the chair. He hadn't even said hello to her. He was standing over her deathbed, interrogating the staff about his legal power to sign checks. "Yes, Mr. Ross," the nurse said tightly. "The power of attorney is on file. It activates upon incapacitation. The doctor has noted her decline." "Excellent," Grant said. He finally glanced at the bed, then at me. "Make sure she stays hydrated. I have calls to make." And with that, he spun on his heel and walked out. I looked at Grandma. Her eyes were closed, but her jaw was set tight. She had heard him. She had heard her son worry about paperwork while she lay dying. 5 minutes later, the door opened again. This time it was Sloane. She brought a gust of expensive perfume that overpowered the peppermint scent. She didn't come to the bedside. She stayed near the foot of the bed, holding her phone up. "Hey, sis," she whispered. Though she wasn't looking at me, she was looking at her screen, adjusting the filter. She angled the phone so that Grandma's frail figure was in the background, out of focus, while her own sad, perfectly made-up face filled the frame. Click. She checked the image, frowned, adjusted her hair. Click. "Okay, got it," Sloane muttered. She typed a caption rapidly. "Praying for the strongest woman I know. Heartbroken. #family, #love, #grandma. Are you going to talk to her?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Sloane looked up, surprised. "She's sleeping, Violet. I don't want to wake her. Miles is waiting in the car. Just tell her I stopped by." "Okay." She turned and left. The entire visit had lasted less than 2 minutes. I looked down at Grandma. Her eyes were open again. She was staring at the empty space where Sloane had been standing. There was no anger in her face, just a profound, heartbreaking resignation. "She didn't even touch you," I whispered. Grandma closed her eyes again. "I do not need photos," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I need people, real people." I stayed for another hour until the nurse came in to change the IV bag. I kissed Grandma's forehead, promising I would be back first thing in the morning. I gathered my purse and walked out, feeling hollowed out, scraped clean by the callousness of my family. I walked down the long corridor toward the exit. The waiting area was empty now. Lorna and Sloane had presumably left to salvage their evening. But as I passed a small alcove near the vending machines, I heard a familiar voice. It was Grant. He was pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. He didn't see me. I slowed my steps, intending to ask him if he was going home, but the words he was speaking made me stop cold. "Yes, I understand the package deals," Grant was saying, his tone eager, almost excited. "Look, just lock it in. The black interior with the custom stitching. Yes, we will take it." I frowned. Was he talking about a funeral package, a casket? "No, no financing," Grant said, laughing a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Cash. Direct wire. I will handle the transfer in the morning. Just have it ready for pickup by the weekend. Sloane is going to flip when she sees it." My blood ran cold. Sloane is going to flip when she sees it. "Don't worry about the funds," Grant said, pausing to listen. Then he said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I have the authorization now. It is good to go. Just charge it to the account ending in 449. Yes, that is the one. We are clearing it out. I stood in the shadows, my hand covering my mouth to stifle a gasp. The account ending in 449. I knew that number. I had seen it on the paperwork Grandma showed me 3 years ago. It wasn't his account. It was the account Grandma June had set aside for me. Grant hung up the phone and walked briskly toward the exit, whistling a low, tuneless melody. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery, not a man whose mother was dying. I watched him go, the realization crashing over me like a tidal wave. They weren't just neglecting her, they were looting her, and they were using the very money she meant for my survival to buy my sister a trophy to impress her boyfriend. The morning after the incident at the hospice, the sun rose over Cedar Hollow with a cheerful, mocking brightness. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice on the phone charge it to the account ending in 449 and saw the flat line of his mouth as he discussed buying a car while his mother lay dying. I needed proof. My grandmother, in her lucid moment, had asked me to go to her house. She had wanted me to retrieve a specific box of keepsakes and family papers, items she did not trust to remain safe in an empty house. At the time, I thought she was just being sentimental. Now, driving down the familiar oak-lined street toward her small Victorian cottage, I realized she was being strategic. I pulled into Grandma June's driveway. The house looked quiet, the curtains drawn tight like eyelids shut against the world. I used the spare key she had given me 10 years ago, the metal cold and heavy in my palm. The door creaked open, revealing the scent of lavender and old timber that I had loved since childhood. But today, the silence inside did not feel peaceful. It felt held, like a breath before a scream. I walked straight to her study at the back of the house. This was where she paid her bills, wrote her letters, and managed the modest estate my grandfather had left her. I knew this room better than my own office. I knew that the filing cabinet in the corner was always locked, and I knew that the small fireproof safe in the closet was where she kept the documents that mattered. I stopped in the doorway. My stomach dropped, a sensation like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. The room had been disturbed. It was subtle, but to someone who knew the geography of June Caldwell's life, it was a crime scene. The top drawer of the filing cabinet was slightly ajar. I walked over and pulled it open. The hanging folders were there, labeled in her neat, spidery cursive medical. House deed. Taxes. But behind the taxes folder, there was a gap. I stared at the bottom of the drawer. There was a rectangular patch of metal that was perfectly clean. Surrounded by a fine layer of gray dust that had accumulated over years, a folder had been sitting there until very recently. A thick folder. The space was wide enough to hold bank statements dating back a decade. I turned to the closet. The door was unlatched. I pushed it open and knelt before the small safe on the floor. It was an old model, the kind with a dial and a key. My breath hitched. Around the keyhole, the gray paint was chipped and scratched, revealing the bright, raw steel underneath. Someone had been here, and they had been in a hurry. They had jammed a key in, twisted it with force, perhaps struggled with the mechanism. There were fresh shavings of metal on the carpet fibers. I reached out and touched the scratches. They were jagged, violent. This was not a burglary by a stranger looking for jewelry. A stranger would have taken the silver candlesticks on the mantel or the television in the parlor. Nothing else in the house was touched. This was a targeted extraction. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pull my phone from my pocket. I dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice breathless and distracted. "Violet, I cannot talk long. We are dealing with the florist for the weekend mixer. Do you know how hard it is to get white hydrangeas on short notice?" "Mom," I said, my voice tight. "I am at Grandma's house. Someone broke into the safe. The files are gone." There was a pause on the other end, a silence that lasted 3 seconds too long. "Don't be hysterical, Violet," Lorna said, her tone shifting from socialite to scold. "Nobody broke in. Your father stopped by yesterday morning to organize some paperwork. We are handling her affairs. That is what responsible children do." "He scratched the lock," I said, my voice rising. "He took the files for the trust. The account she told me about. Mom, why did he take the files?" "We do not have time for your paranoia." Grant's voice suddenly cut in. He must have been standing right next to her, listening on speaker. His voice was calm, dismissive. "I am the power of attorney. Violet, I am securing the assets so they do not get frozen in probate. Stop snooping around a house that does not belong to you and go to the hospice. Do not stress your grandmother out with these wild accusations." The line went dead. I stood there in the silent study, the phone gripped in my hand. Wild accusations. They were gaslighting me. They were standing in the sunlight, telling me it was midnight. I did not go to the hospice. I marched out of the house, locked the door, and got into my battered sedan. I drove toward the wealthy side of Cedar Hollow, toward the sprawling colonial house where my parents lived. I drove faster than I should have, the speedometer climbing past 40, 50. When I turned onto their street, I saw it, parked right in the center of their circular driveway. Blocking the path to the front door was a monstrosity of metal and glass. It was a brand new SUV, jet black, the chrome gleaming under the morning sun. It was massive, luxurious, and aggressive. It did not have license plates yet, just the temporary dealer tag in the rear window, and standing next to it was Sloane. She was wearing a white tennis skirt and a cashmere sweater, looking like an advertisement for the American dream. She was holding a key fob in her hand, tossing it up and catching it, a bright, bubbly laugh escaping her lips as she admired her reflection in the tinted windows. I slammed my car into park at the curb and got out. Leaving my door open, I marched up the driveway. "Violet," Sloane called out, waving the key fob. "Look, can you believe it? Daddy totally surprised me. It's the Overland edition. Miles is going to die when I pick him up for lunch." I ignored her. I walked past the shining beast of a car and up the front steps. The front door opened before I could knock. Grant and Lorna were standing there. They didn't look guilty. They looked annoyed, like I was a delivery driver bringing a package they hadn't ordered. "I told you on the phone," Grant said, blocking the doorway. "We are busy." "You bought it," I said, pointing a trembling finger at the SUV. "You took the money from the account ending in 449, the money Grandma told me was mine, and you bought that." Grant sighed, a long, weary sound that suggested he was dealing with a toddler. "Violet, come inside. You are making a scene. The neighbors have ears." He stepped back, and I followed them into the foyer. The house was cool and smelled of expensive candles. Everything was perfectly placed. Everything was a lie. "We did not take anything," Grant said, walking into the living room and pouring himself a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. "We reallocated family resources. That money was sitting in a dormant account, earning negligible interest. It was doing nothing." "It was doing something," I shouted. "It was waiting for me. Grandma told me herself. She said it was my safety net. She said she put it there so I wouldn't have to ask you for anything." Lorna sat down on the sofa, crossing her legs elegantly. "And you don't have to ask us for anything. Violet, you are fine. You have Terry. He has a stable job at the bank. You have a roof over your head. You are married. You are settled." She said settled like it meant finished. "Sloane," Lorna continued, gesturing toward the window where my sister was still admiring the car, "is in a critical launch phase. She needs to project success to attract success. The Ketters are old money. Violet, they notice these things. If Sloane pulls up in a dented compact car, she looks like a liability. If she pulls up in that," she pointed to the driveway, "she looks like an asset. It is an investment in her future, in the family's future." "So you stole $20,000 from me to buy her a prop?" I asked, my voice cracking. "It was over $50,000 in that account. Dad, where is the rest?" Grant took a sip of water. "Administrative costs, outstanding bills, and the rest is in a holding account for future liquidity needs. It is complicated financial structuring. Violet, you wouldn't understand the nuances of liquidity. I understand theft, I snapped. I'm going to tell her. I'm going to go back to the hospice right now and tell Grandma what you did. The room went deadly silent. Lorna stood up. Her face changed. The mask of the bored socialite dropped, revealing something sharper, something dangerous. She walked toward me until she was standing just a foot away. I could smell her perfume, a cloying floral scent that made me nauseous. You will do no such thing, Lorna said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Why shouldn't I? I challenged, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Because your grandmother's heart is functioning at 15% capacity, Lorna hissed. She is hanging by a thread. The doctors said any shock, any stress, could trigger a final cardiac event. If you go in there and start wailing about money and cars, if you upset her, you will kill her. I froze. Do you want that on your conscience, Violet? Grant added from across the room, his voice heavy with false concern. Do you want to be the one who pushes her over the edge? Because if she dies 10 minutes after you speak to her, that is on you, not us. You? I stared at them. They had weaponized her death. They had built a wall around their greed using her fragility as the bricks. You are monsters, I whispered. We are realists, Grant said, turning his back to me. Now, go to the hospice. Sit with her. Hold her hand. Be a good granddaughter. But keep your mouth shut about business. I turned to leave, blinded by tears of rage. I couldn't breathe in that house. I needed to get out. But as I turned, my eyes caught a stack of papers sitting on the hall table, near Grant's keys. It was a legal document. The top page was flipped open. I saw the bold header, Durable Power of Attorney. I shouldn't have stopped. I should have run. But I stopped. I looked down at the signature line at the bottom of the page. It was dated 3 days ago. I stared at the signature June A. Caldwell. I had spent my childhood watching Grandma write. I knew her hand. I knew the way she crossed her T's with a sharp, upward slash. I knew the way she looped her J a wide, generous loop that looked like a balloon string. The signature on the paper was shaky, which was to be expected. But the J was wrong. It didn't loop. It was jagged, sharp at the bottom, like a fishhook, and the C in Caldwell was closed at the top. Something she never did. That's not her signature, I said loud enough for them to hear. Grant stiffened. He didn't turn around. Her hands are weak. Violet, her motor control is failing. No, I said, shaking my head, the realization settling in my gut like lead. She didn't sign this. You did. Or you held her hand and forced it. Lorna stepped between me and the table, her eyes narrowing. Leave. Now. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and realized that the woman standing before me didn't see a daughter. She saw a leak that needed to be plugged. I'm leaving, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. But this isn't over. I walked out the front door, past Sloane, who was now sitting in the driver's seat of the stolen car, adjusting the rearview mirror. She waved at me through the glass. A happy, oblivious little wave. I got into my car and drove away. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearing. They thought they had boxed me in. They thought the threat of Grandma's health would silence me. They thought I was weak because I had always been quiet. But they had forgotten one thing. Grandma June had told me to get the box. She had told me to look for the papers. She knew. She knew what they were capable of. I wasn't going to the hospice to kill her with the truth. I was going to the hospice because I finally understood that she was the only partner I had in this war, and I needed to know what she wanted me to do about the signature that wasn't hers. I drove home in a fugue state, the road blurring into a gray ribbon of asphalt and tears. When I walked through my front door, the silence of my house felt heavy, like the air before a storm. I dropped my keys on the console table, and the sound echoed like a gunshot. Terry was in the living room, surrounded by a fortress of paperwork for his quarterly risk assessment. He looked up as I entered, his eyes warm behind his glasses, but the warmth vanished the moment he saw my face. "Violet." He stood up, knocking a stack of files to the floor. "What happened? Is it June? Is she gone?" I shook my head, unable to speak. I walked to the kitchen, my movements mechanical. I needed water. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of sand. I reached for a glass from the cupboard, but my hand was shaking so violently that the glass slipped from my fingers and shattered in the sink. The noise broke me. I gripped the edge of the counter, gasping for air, the sobs finally tearing out of my chest. Terry was there in 2 seconds. He turned me around, his hands firm on my shoulders. Hey, breathe. Look at me. You're shaking apart." "They took it," I choked out. "They took everything." "Who took what?" Terry asked, his voice calm but intense. "Violet, talk to me. Don't give me the edited version. Don't protect them. Tell me exactly what happened." I looked into his steady, practical eyes, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't try to soften the edges of my family's cruelty. I told him everything. I told him about the empty space in Grandma's filing cabinet. I told him about the scratched safe. I told him about the gleaming black SUV in my parents' driveway, about Sloan waving the keys like a trophy, and about Grant's cold admission that he had drained Grandma's account, my safety net, to buy it. And finally, I told him about the signature that wasn't hers. Terry listened without interrupting. He didn't gasp. He didn't curse. He absorbed the information like he absorbed data at work processing. Analyzing, categorizing. When I finished, he didn't hug me immediately. He went into problem-solving mode. "Okay," he said, his voice level. "This isn't just family drama. Violet, this is financial fraud, potentially elder abuse." "They said it was reallocation of resources," I said bitterly, wiping my eyes. "They said I would kill Grandma if I told her." "That is emotional blackmail," Terry said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. "Let's focus on the money. Money leaves a trail, always. You said you saw the account number on a document years ago. Do you have access to any of Grandma's digital correspondence? Old emails, anything?" "I used to help her set up her online banking," I remembered. "Years ago, before her eyes got bad, I might still be listed as a recovery contact on her email." "Get your laptop," Terry said. We sat at the kitchen table. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room. I logged into my old email account, the one I hadn't used since college, and searched for anything related to Caldwell. "There," Terry pointed. It wasn't much. Just an automated notification from the bank sent 6 months ago, profile update confirmation. But linked to that email was a secondary notification from a bill pay service Grandma used for her utilities. I managed to reset the password using my phone number, which was still on file. We got in. The transaction history was a wall of text, mostly mundane payments to the electric company and the pharmacy. But right at the top, dated 2 days ago, was a massive outbound transfer. $48,500, Terry read aloud. "Wire transfer, recipient Prestige Motors of North Carolina." "That's the dealership in the next county," I whispered. "The one with the no-haggle luxury pricing." Terry clicked on the transaction details. "Look at the memo line. Down payment plus platinum options package." "What is a platinum options package?" I asked. Terry opened a new tab and searched the dealership's website. He scrolled for a moment, then stopped. He turned the laptop toward me. Custom leather stitching, upgraded sound system, and personalized engraving on the dashboard console. I felt sick. Engraving. "If they engraved her name or initials on the car," Terry said quietly, "it makes the vehicle non-returnable, or at least, it significantly complicates a refund. They didn't just buy a car. Violet, they branded it. They made sure the money was sunk." I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram. I went to Sloane's profile. Her story was still active, a glowing ring around her profile picture. I tapped it. There she was, sitting in the driver's seat, filming a panning shot of the dashboard. So obsessed with these details, the caption read. The camera zoomed in on the wood grain panel above the glove box. Etched into the wood, in elegant gold script, was Sloane Ross. She put her name on it, I said, my voice hollow. With Grandma's money, while Grandma is dying. Terry closed the laptop with a snap. This is actionable. Violet, Grant used a power of attorney to transfer funds for a non-essential purchase that does not benefit the principal that is, your grandmother. In fact, it actively depletes her estate. If that POA document you saw has a forged or coerced signature, he is looking at felony charges. He said he was securing assets, I said. He is securing a prison sentence if we push this, Terry said. But we need more than just a wire transfer. We need to know exactly what June wanted. I have the box, I said, remembering the metal box I had retrieved from Grandma's house before confronting my parents. I had left it in the trunk of my car in my haste. The keepsakes! She told me to get it! I ran out to the driveway and retrieved the rusted metal lockbox. I brought it back to the kitchen and set it on the table. It was heavy, smelling of the same lavender and dust as her study. I opened the lid. Inside were photos, old letters from my grandfather, and a small velvet pouch containing her pearl earrings. But at the very bottom, beneath a stack of birthday cards I had made for her when I was 5, was a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with tape. On the front, in Grandma's unmistakable, looping handwriting, the handwriting that looked nothing like the signature on Grant's document, were the words, Violet, for when you need to know you are not crazy. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a document titled, The June Caldwell Living Trust, dated 4 years ago. Paperclipped to the front was a handwritten note on yellow legal pad paper. I read the note aloud, my voice breaking. Violet, if you are reading this, it means they have started. I always knew Grant would confuse family money with his money, eventually. He has been asking about my account since your grandfather died. He thinks I don't hear him on the phone with his creditors. I paused, wiping a tear that had fallen onto the paper. This document proves that the house, the savings, and the specific account I set aside for you are protected in a trust. Grant is not the trustee. He thinks he will be, but he is not. If they touch your portion, or if they try to sell the house while I'm still breathing, do not argue with them. They will outshout you. They always do. I turned the page. At the bottom of the note, she had written one final instruction in bold, underlined letters. Call Malcolm Price. He has the originals. He is the only one who can stop the bleeding. Malcolm Price, Terry said, leaning in. The attorney. I think so, I said. He was Grandpa's lawyer. I haven't seen him in years. She knew, Terry said, shaking his head in amazement. She knew they would do this. She was 5 steps ahead of them the whole time. She knew I wouldn't be able to fight them alone, I said softly. She knew I would doubt myself. For when you need to know you are not crazy, she knew they would gaslight me. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. But for the first time in 24 hours, the fog in my brain had lifted. I have to tell her, I said. Violet, Terry started. Remember what your mother said about the stress? No, I cut him off. That is their narrative. That is the cage they built to keep me quiet. Grandma isn't fragile. Her body is failing. Yes, but her mind. She wrote this note. She planned this defense. She isn't a victim waiting to be protected from the truth. She is the general of this army, and she is waiting for her soldier to report for duty. I stood up. I'm going there tomorrow morning, not to visit, not to sit quietly while Sloane takes selfies. I am going to tell her that the trap has been sprung. I am going to tell her they bought the car. And then I am going to ask her exactly what she wants me to do with Malcolm Price. Terry stood up and pulled me into a hug. He held me tight, and I buried my face in his shoulder, smelling the laundry detergent and the faint scent of dinner he had cooked hours ago. I'll drive you, he said. No, I said. pulling back and looking him in the eye. "I need to do this part alone, but I need you to find Malcolm Price's number and have it ready." "Done," Terry said. I looked down at the note one last time. Call Malcolm Price. It wasn't just an instruction, it was a weapon. And tomorrow, I was going to pull the trigger. The morning sun had not yet burned off the mist clinging to the Blue Ridge Mountains when I pulled into the hospice parking lot. It was 6 a.m. The lot was empty, save for a few staff vehicles and a delivery truck unloading crates of supplies. The aggressively shiny SUV was nowhere to be seen. And for that, I was grateful. I walked through the automatic doors, the silence of the facility wrapping around me like a cold blanket. The night shift nurse, a woman named Brenda with kind eyes and tired posture, looked up from her station. "You are early, Mrs. Bridges," she said softly. "I need to see her," I said. "Is she awake?" "She has been awake for an hour," Brenda said, glancing at the monitor. "She refused the sedative last night, said she needed a clear head for the morning. I think she was waiting for you." A chill went down my spine. She was waiting for me. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the gray carpet. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of guilt and determination. My mother's voice echoed in my head, "If you upset her, you will kill her." I was carrying a grenade into a room made of glass, and I was about to pull the pin. I pushed the door to room 304 open. Grandma June was sitting up, propped against a mountain of white pillows. She looked small, her body whittled down by the failure of her heart, but her eyes were open and startlingly clear. The milky haze I had seen yesterday seemed to have receded, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. She wasn't looking at the window. She was looking at the door. She was looking at me. "Close it," she said. Her voice was weak, lacking the resonance it once had, but the command was unmistakable. I closed the door and walked to the side of the bed. I didn't sit down. I felt like I needed to stand to deliver this news, like a soldier reporting a defeat. "Grandma," I started, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "I went to the house. I found the box." "And she asked. She didn't ask how I was. She went straight to the business." "And I went to the bank records," I said, gripping the metal rail of the bed. "And I went to Mom and Dad's house." I took a deep breath, the air in the room tasting of peppermint and inevitable ends. They emptied the account ending in 449, all of it, $50,000, give or take the fees. Grandma June didn't blink. Her face remained a mask of calm. "Go on." "They bought a car," I said, the words spilling out faster now. "A black SUV, for Sloan, to impress the Ketter family. Dad transferred the money directly to the dealership, and Sloan she had her name engraved on the dashboard. They made sure it couldn't be returned." I watched her chest rise and fall under the thin hospital blanket. I waited for the gasp, the clutch at the heart, the monitor to start beeping a frantic warning. I waited for the guilt to crush me, but the monitor kept it steady. Rhythmic beep, 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 beep. "And the signature?" Grandma asked. "The power of attorney." "It doesn't look like yours," I whispered. "The J is wrong. The C is closed. Dad told me that if I told you any of this, the shock would kill you. He said I would be the one to murder you." I finally stopped, tears hot on my cheeks. "I'm so sorry. Grandma." I didn't stop them. I was too late. I bowed my head, unable to look at her, waiting for her grief. But then I heard a sound. It wasn't a sob. It was a sigh, a long, weary exhalation of air that sounded less like sadness and more like exhaustion. "Look at me, Violet," she said. I looked up. Her eyes were dry. There was no shock in them. There was only a cold, hard recognition. "I know my son," she said clearly, "and I know his wife. I have watched them for 40 years. Grant has always believed that he is one lucky break away from greatness. He treats people like leverage and money like oxygen. He cannot help himself." She shifted slightly, wincing at the effort, but waved away my hand when I reached out to help. "I did not think they would be this sloppy," she continued, a trace of steel entering her voice. I thought they would wait until the funeral. I gave them too much credit for patience, but I did not give them any credit for morality. You knew, I asked, stunned. You knew they would steal it. I hedged my bets, she said. In gambling, you never put all your chips on a single color unless you control the wheel. I knew that as I got weaker, Grant would get bolder. He sees my decline as his promotion. She pointed a trembling finger toward the bedside table. My phone! Give it to me! I reached for the smartphone sitting on the nightstand. It was an older model, one with large icons that I had set up for her years ago. I placed it in her hand. Her fingers were crooked with arthritis, but they moved with purpose. She didn't scroll through contacts. She tapped the keypad. She knew the number by heart. She pressed the call button and then the speaker icon. The phone rang once, twice. Malcolm Price, a deep, gravelly voice, answered. It was 7 a.m, yet he sounded wide awake, as if he had been sitting by the phone waiting for this exact call. Malcolm, Grandma said. Her voice changed. The raspiness vanished, replaced by a tone of absolute authority. It was the voice of the woman who had run a household and managed an estate for 5 decades. June, Malcolm replied. Is it time? They bought a car, she said. They emptied the 449 account, and they forged a signature on the durable power of attorney. There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by the sound of a pen scratching on paper. Understood, Malcolm said. Did they access the main trust? Not yet, she said. But they will. They are hungry, Malcolm, and they think I am asleep. I have the paperwork in front of me, Malcolm said. The trigger clause is clear. Unauthorized dissipation of assets, financial elder abuse. We can bypass the warning phase. Grandma closed her eyes for a second, gathering her strength. When she opened them, they were hard as diamonds. Malcolm, she said, enunciating every syllable. Activate the trust. Freeze their access. Now. 7 words. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply issued an execution order for their financial lives. Consider it done, Malcolm said. I am sending the notice to the bank within the hour. The accounts will be locked by 9 o'clock. The cards will decline by lunch. Good, Grandma said. June, Malcolm added, his voice softening slightly. About the event this weekend, the party, I froze. Party, I whispered. Grandma held up a hand to silence me. Yes, Malcolm, the party. I received an invitation, Malcolm said. Grant sent it to my office. He labeled it a celebration of life and legacy. He seems to be under the impression that I am merely a spectator to his ascendancy. He likes an audience, Grandma said dryly. He always has. Do you want me to intervene before then? Malcolm asked. I can have the sheriff serve the papers today. No, Grandma said. No papers today. Let the freeze happen quietly. Let them panic in private, but I want the ending to be public. She looked at me then, her gaze piercing. I want you at that party, Malcolm, she said into the phone, and Violet will be there too. I will be there, Malcolm promised. I will bring the file. Thank you, Malcolm. Checkmate. She tapped the red button to end the call. The silence rushed back into the room, but it felt different now. It wasn't empty silence. It was the heavy, charged silence of a battlefield before the first cannon fires. Grandma, I said, my voice barely a whisper. What party? She rested her head back against the pillows, her energy fading slightly now that the task was done. Your parents are hosting a gathering on Saturday, at my house. They are calling it a living wake or some such nonsense, but the real purpose is to show off the new car to the Ketters. They plan to announce that I gifted it to Sloane as a final gesture of love. My mouth fell open. They are throwing a party at your house while you are dying here, to show off the stolen car. They think I am too weak to know, she said. They think I am stuck in this bed, counting the ceiling tiles. They do not realize that the house is not theirs to open. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Violet," she said, "I need you to do something very difficult." "Anything," I said. "I'll do anything. I'll get the police. I'll get Terry." "No police yet," she said. "I want you to go to that party, you and Terry. I want you to dress in the best clothes you own. Do not wear black. Do not look like you are mourning. Look like you are victorious." "But Mom," I started. "Mom hates when I look nice. She'll make comments." "Let her," Grandma said. "Let her say whatever she wants. You are going to walk into that party, and you are going to stand there. You are not going to say a word about the money. You are not going to scream at your father. You are not going to slap your sister." "I don't know if I can do that," I admitted. "After what I saw, I want to burn the car." "Fire is messy," Grandma said. "And it destroys the evidence. We do not want fire, Violet. We want illumination." She squeezed my hand. "The freeze on the accounts will confuse them. They will think it is a banking error. They will be scrambling, trying to fix it before the guests arrive. They will be desperate to keep the illusion alive for the Ketters. I want you to watch them sweat, and when Malcolm arrives, I want you to be the witness." "Witness to what?" I asked. "To the fact that actions have consequences," she said. "Grant thinks he can write his own narrative. He thinks he can rewrite my will with a forged signature and buy status with my savings. He thinks the world works that way, because I have always quietly cleaned up his messes." She looked toward the window, where the sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the floor. "I am done cleaning," she said softly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "About the trust about Malcolm." "Because you needed to see it for yourself," she said, turning her eyes back to me. "If I had told you a week ago that your parents were capable of this, would you have believed me? Or would you have made excuses for them? Would you have said, 'Oh, Grandma, they aren't that bad'?" I looked down at my shoes. She was right. A week ago, I would have defended them. I would have said they were snobs. Yes, but not criminals. I needed to see the empty file drawer. I needed to see the scratched safe. I needed to see Sloane waving those keys. "I needed you angry, Violet," she said. "Sadness makes you passive. Anger makes you move." "I am angry," I said. "I am furious." "Good," she said. "Hold on to that. Keep it cold. Do not let it boil over until the moment is right." She closed her eyes, the fatigue finally claiming her. "Now go. Go to work. Act normal. Let them think they have won for 2 more days. Let them build their stage." "Grandma," I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I love you." "I know," she whispered without opening her eyes. "You are the only one who does." I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob, when she spoke one last time. "Violet." "Yes, Grandma." "That car," she murmured. "They think it is a trophy. They do not know it is evidence. Do not let Sloane drive it out of the county." "I won't," I promised. I walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar as she liked it. I walked past the nurse's station, past the reception desk, and out into the bright, blinding morning. I took a deep breath of the crisp air. I felt different. The crushing weight of helplessness that had sat on my chest for 34 years was gone. It was replaced by something heavier, but sharper, a sword instead of a stone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Terry. I found Malcolm Price's office. "Do you want the address?" I typed back quickly. "Grandma already called him. We are going to a party on Saturday." I got into my car and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, but my jaw was set. Grandma June hadn't cried. She had called, and now we were going to answer. Malcolm Price's law office was tucked away in a brick building on the edge of Cedar Hollow's historic district. Sandwiched between a bakery and a shoe repair shop, there was no glass facade, no marble lobby, and no receptionist with a headset. There was just a heavy oak door with a brass plaque that needed polishing. It read, "Malcolm Price, Attorney at Law." Est, 1982. Terry and I arrived at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was still vibrating with the adrenaline from the morning visit to the hospice. But Terry was in full professional mode. He was carrying a leather portfolio, and his face was set in the same neutral expression he wore during high-stakes audits. We knocked, and a deep voice told us to enter. The interior smelled of old leather, pipe tobacco, and dust. It was a library of a room, lined floor to ceiling with legal texts that looked like they hadn't been moved since the Reagan administration. Sitting behind a desk that was large enough to land a small aircraft on was Malcolm Price. He was a man constructed of sharp angles and gray wool. He had a shock of white hair, thick glasses that magnified his eyes, and hands that were currently resting on top of a very thick, very red file folder. He didn't smile when we walked in. He didn't offer us coffee. He simply gestured to the 2 wooden chairs opposite him. "Mrs. Bridges," he said, his voice rumbling like a distant subway train. "Mr. Bridges, please, sit." We sat. I felt like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office, even though I knew we were on the same side. "June called me," Malcolm said, skipping the pleasantries. "She sounded stronger than she has in months. Rage is a powerful stimulant." "She told us to come to you," I said. "She said you have the originals." Malcolm tapped the red folder. "I have everything. I have been the custodian of the Caldwell estate for 30 years. Your grandfather was a cautious man. Violet, your grandmother is a brilliant woman. Together, they built a fortress around their assets that they hoped would never need to be manned. Unfortunately, your father has decided to storm the gates." He opened the folder. It wasn't a mess of loose papers. It was organized with military precision. He pulled out a document titled The June Caldwell Revocable Living Trust. "Let me explain the architecture," Malcolm said, looking at Terry. "June did not leave a simple will. Wills are public record once probated, and they can be contested. A trust is private. It is a separate legal entity. June transferred ownership of her primary assets into this trust 5 years ago." "Assets like her savings?" Terry asked. "Savings, investment portfolios, and real estate," Malcolm corrected. "June is the grantor and the primary trustee during her life. However, there is a specific clause, Article 7, Section C, that triggers an immediate change in trusteeship if there is evidence of, and I quote, malfeasance, unauthorized dissipation of assets, or exploitation by a family member or appointed agent." He slid a paper across the desk. "This morning, based on June's verbal affidavit and the transaction records you uncovered, I invoked Article 7. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Grant Ross has been removed as a potential successor trustee. I have assumed the role of temporary fiduciary. The bank accounts are locked." "So he can't spend any more?" I asked, feeling a wave of relief. "He cannot buy a pack of gum with her money," Malcolm said flatly. "But we have a bigger problem than the cash." He pulled out another document. This one looked older. The paper slightly yellowed. It was a property deed. "Violet, tell me about your parents' house," Malcolm said. "The colonial on Sycamore Drive, the one with the pillars." "What about it?" I asked, confused. "They have lived there for 20 years. Dad always talks about the equity he has built in it." Malcolm looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Grant Ross has 0 equity in that house. He does not own it. Lorna does not own it." I blinked. "What?" "But they renovated the kitchen last year. They talk about property taxes all the time. They pay the taxes as part of their occupancy agreement," Malcolm said. "But the deed belongs to the June Caldwell Trust. Your grandparents bought that house in 1995. When Grant and Lorna moved in, June allowed them to live there rent-free to help them get on their feet after Grant's second business failed. They were supposed to stay for 2 years. They never left." I felt the room spin. My parents, who sneered at renters, who looked down on anyone who didn't own property, were living in a house they didn't own. Their entire image of landed gentry was a lie. "Does Sloane know?" I asked. "I doubt it," Malcolm said. Grant has spent 2 decades pretending he is the lord of the manor, but legally, he is a tenant at will, and the trust has the power to evict. Terry leaned forward, his eyes scanning the deed. So if the trust is activated due to abuse, that puts their housing at risk. It puts their entire existence at risk, Malcolm confirmed. Which is why what they did with the car is so catastrophically stupid. They didn't just steal money, they violated the fiduciary duty that allowed them to stay in that house. Malcolm shifted gears, pulling out a copy of the power of attorney document Grant had waved in my face at the house. "Now, let's talk about this," Malcolm said, his voice dropping an octave. "I examined the copy Grant filed with the hospital. It is a standard statutory form. However, he missed the fine print. This POA grants authority for healthcare maintenance and essential support. It explicitly forbids gifting or transfer of assets to the agent or agent's immediate family. So buying the car for Sloan was illegal even if the signature was real," Terry said. "Precisely," Malcolm said. "But the signature is the nail in the coffin. I have engaged a forensic handwriting analyst. Based on the preliminary scan of the document Grant uploaded to the hospital portal versus June's known signature on her checks from last month. It is a clumsy forgery. The tremor is wrong. It looks like someone trying to imitate a shaky hand, rather than a hand that is actually shaking." "He forged it," I whispered. "My father is a criminal." "He is a desperate man," Malcolm corrected. "And desperate men make mistakes. But we need to prove intent. We need to prove he didn't just borrow it, thinking he would pay it back." Malcolm reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder. "June has been recording her calls with Grant for 6 months. She started doing it when he began asking about her life insurance policy." He placed the recorder on the desk and pressed play. The audio was grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. "Come on, Mom." Grant's voice filled the quiet office. "You have that chunk of cash sitting in the credit union. Violet doesn't need it. She married that bank clerk. She is fine. She's plain. Mom, she is not going to do anything spectacular with her life. Sloan has potential. Sloan can marry up, but she needs the trappings. We need to invest in the winner." I felt Terry's hand grip my knee under the table. His grip was hard, angry. Hearing my father call me plain and a bad investment should have hurt, but strangely, it didn't. It just clarified things. I wasn't a daughter to him. I was a line item he wanted to delete. "The money is for Violet." Grandma's voice on the recording was firm. "That is final. Grant." "We will see," Grant had replied, and then the line went dead. Malcolm stopped the recording. "That was 3 weeks ago. That recording proves premeditation. He targeted the specific account he knew was reserved for you. He didn't take it by accident. He took it to deprive you of it." Terry spoke up then. He had been reviewing the transaction log Malcolm had provided. "Mr. Price, there is something else here. Look at the wire transfer to the dealership." He pointed to a string of codes on the paper. "I work in risk," Terry said. "I recognize this routing structure. The payment was split. 50,000 came from June's account, but there is a secondary hold for the insurance and the tax title registration. It is listed under a different name." "Whose?" Malcolm asked. "Miles Ketter," Terry said. My jaw dropped. "Sloane's boyfriend. Why would he be on the payment?" "He isn't paying," Terry explained, his finger tracing the line. "He is listed as the guarantor of record for the insurance, probably because Sloan has a terrible driving record and couldn't get insured on a luxury vehicle alone. But here's the kicker. Grant must have told Miles he was paying for the car cash. So Miles signed the insurance papers thinking it was a free ride. But if the sale is reversed, if the money is recalled as stolen funds, the dealership will go after the guarantor for the difference in depreciation," Malcolm finished, a small, cold smile touching his lips. "If we repo that car after Sloan has driven it and engraved it, the dealership loses value. They will claw that back from whoever signed the liability release. That means Miles Ketter." "Oh my God," I said. "If the Ketters find out they are financially liable for a stolen car, The engagement is over, Malcolm said, and the social standing Grant craves is incinerated. Malcolm closed the file with a heavy thud. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. So, here is the strategy, he said. I could file an injunction today. I could have the police at their door in an hour, but June was specific. She wants to cut the cord permanently. If we strike now, they will play the victim. They will say it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute. They will cry to the Ketters that you are jealous. That is exactly what they will do, I agreed. So we wait for the party, Malcolm said. We wait for Saturday. We let them host this living wake. We let Grant stand up in front of his friends, his neighbors, and the Ketter family. And then what? I asked. Grant is going to make a speech, Malcolm predicted. I know men like him. He will want to publicly claim credit for the car. He will want to announce that he and June are in perfect alignment. He will lie to the room. He will state, on the record, in front of witnesses, that the gift was his idea and that he has the authority. And that is when you walk in, Terry said. That is when I walk in. Malcolm agreed. Not to argue. I don't argue with thieves. I am coming to enforce the trust. I will present the evidence that the funds were stolen, the signature was forged, and that the house they are standing in is subject to immediate repossession. He looked at me, his eyes serious. Violet, you need to be ready. This will not be polite. It will be a demolition. Your mother will scream. Your sister will collapse. Your father will lie until his last breath. Are you prepared to watch that? I thought about the empty file drawer. I thought about the text message telling me to dress properly for the hospice. I thought about the plain comment on the tape. I am ready, I said. Good, Malcolm said, because there is one more thing. The trust has a bad actor clause. If a beneficiary challenges the validity of the trust and loses, they are disinherited completely. By fighting us on Saturday, Grant will effectively zero out his own inheritance. He doesn't know that, Terry asked. He never read the full trust, Malcolm said. He was too arrogant to think June would ever lock him out. Malcolm stood up, signaling the meeting was over. He walked us to the heavy oak door. Go home, he said. Do not answer their calls. If they ask why you haven't visited the hospice today, tell them you are preparing for the party. Tell them you want to look your best for the big reveal. Feed their ego. Make them feel safe. We will, I said. And Violet, Malcolm said, his hand on the doorknob. Grant is going to tell a lie at that party, a specific lie. He is going to say that June isn't lucid. He's going to try to paint her as senile to justify his control. When he says that is when I will open my briefcase, I nodded, a cold resolve settling in my stomach. We walked out into the afternoon sun. Cedar Hollow looked the same as it always did, quiet, pretty, deceptive, but everything had changed. The ground beneath my parents' feet was gone. They just hadn't looked down yet to realize they were falling. The 48 hours leading up to Saturday felt less like the approach of a funeral and more like the opening night of a Broadway production where the script had been written by a sociopath. My parents did not spend those days at the hospice holding Grandma June's hand. They spent them staging the house on Sycamore Drive, the house they did not own for the performance of their lives. From the street, I could see the transformation. A catering van from Laurel Sage, the most expensive event planner in Cedar Hollow, was parked in the driveway, blocking the view of the new SUV. Men in white uniforms were unloading gilt-edged chairs and rolling racks of glassware. A banner had been hung across the front porch columns. It was tasteful, cream-colored with gold lettering that read, "A celebration of the legacy of June Caldwell." It was grotesque. They were throwing a party for a woman who was still breathing, using her home as the venue and her money to pay for the champagne, all while plotting to announce that her legacy was actually just a down payment on a luxury car for my sister. I watched it all from a distance, parked down the street in my battered sedan, feeling a cold, hard knot tighten in my stomach. But the real horror show wasn't happening on the lawn. It was happening on my phone, Sloane had turned her Instagram into a weaponized documentary of affection. Every few hours, a new photo or video appeared. There was Sloane holding a single white rose with the caption, "Strength runs in our blood." There was a throwback photo of her and Grandma from 10 years ago. And then, the centerpiece of video of the new car, filmed in soft focus with an acoustic guitar track playing in the background. Grandma knew how much I needed to feel safe on the road. The caption read, "She insisted on this gift before she got too tired. I will drive it for you. Nana. Legacy family. First blessed." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the image. The audacity was breathtaking. She was rewriting history in real time. She was publicly claiming the theft as a dying wish. Every like, every heart reaction from her followers was a brick in the wall of lies they were building to protect themselves. They were crowdsourcing their alibi. I wanted to scream. I wanted to comment "thief" in all caps. But I remembered Malcolm's voice. Let them build their stage. I put the phone away and drove to work. I needed to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Grandma had told me to act normal, to go to work, to let them think they had won. But I soon learned that my mother was not content with just winning the money. She wanted to preemptively destroy the witness. It happened on Friday afternoon at Riverton Arts Outreach. I was in the middle of organizing the fall scholarship schedule when Sarah, my executive director, knocked on my doorframe. Sarah was a kind woman, usually flustered and cheerful, but today she looked uncomfortable. She closed the door behind her. "Violet," she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. "Is everything okay at home?" "It is a hard week," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My grandmother is in hospice. We are expecting the end soon." "I know," Sarah said, picking at a loose thread on her sweater. "I had a phone call this morning. From your mother." My blood ran cold. "My mother called you." "She wanted to give us a heads up," Sarah said, making air quotes. "She said that the grief is hitting you very hard. She said you have been erratic, that you might be suffering from some emotional instability due to the stress. She suggested we might want to scale back your responsibilities for a few weeks. For your own good, of course." I sat perfectly still. It was a masterstroke. Lorna knew I would be at the party. She knew there was a chance I might cause a scene. So she was planting the seeds of my insanity beforehand. If I stood up on Saturday and accused them of theft, she could turn to the room and say, "See, I told you she was unstable. She is having a breakdown." She was discrediting me before I had even opened my mouth. "Sarah," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "my grandmother is dying, and I am sad, but I am not unstable. My mother manages stress by controlling people. She is trying to manage me." Sarah looked at me for a long moment. She saw the stack of perfectly organized files on my desk. She saw the calm set of my jaw. "I didn't think you sounded erratic," Sarah said quietly. "She sounded smooth, too smooth. I just wanted you to know." "Thank you," I said. "I will be at work on Monday, and I will be fine." "Okay," Sarah said, standing up. "Let me know if you need anything." When she left, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt a cold, metallic clarity settle over me. This wasn't a family misunderstanding. This was a tactical strike. My mother was willing to sabotage my career to protect her social standing. I went home that evening to a war room. Terry had turned our dining table into a command center. He had printed out the bank statements, the timeline of events, and the text messages Sloane had sent me. He had arranged them in chronological order. "I have been tracking the guests," Terry said as I walked in. He didn't ask about my day. He could see the look on my face. Sloane tagged the location in her latest post. "The guest list is heavy on local business owners. The Ketters are definitely coming, and the mayor might drop by." "Good," I said, dropping my bag. "The more witnesses, the better." "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Lorna called my boss," I told him. "She tried to paint me as mentally unstable." Terry stopped typing. His face went dark. "She went after your job." "She went after my credibility," I corrected. She wants to make sure that if I speak, no one listens. Terry stood up and walked over to me. He took my hands. Then we don't give them a breakdown. We give them ice. We give them absolute, undeniable facts. You don't need to scream. Violet, you just need to stand there and let Malcolm drop the hammer. I know, I said. I need to get ready. I went upstairs to my closet, usually, for family events. I wore what Lorna wanted: soft pastels, floral prints, things that made me fade into the wallpaper so I wouldn't clash with Sloane. Not this time. I pushed aside the beige and the pink. I reached to the back of the closet and pulled out a dress I had bought 2 years ago and never worn because I thought it was too much. It was a deep, midnight navy, almost black. It was tailored, sharp-shouldered, and fitted. It looked like armor. I laid it on the bed. Then I opened my jewelry box. I took out the delicate gold chain Grandma June had given me for my 30th birthday. It had a small pendant, a simple compass. So you can always find your way, she had said. I put it around my neck. The cool metal against my skin felt like a promise. I wasn't the spare child anymore. I wasn't the plain investment. I was the one holding the map. My phone buzzed on the dresser. It was a text from Malcolm Price. Advice for tomorrow. Do not sit near the front door. When I announce myself, their instinct will be to remove the threat if you are near the exit. Grant might try to physically usher you out for your own health. Sit in the center. Make them drag you past the Ketters if they want you gone. I shivered. The idea that my father would physically drag me out of a room seemed impossible a week ago. Now, it seemed like a certainty. Terry, I called out. Malcolm says we need to sit in the middle. Way ahead of you, Terry shouted back from downstairs. I am looking at the layout of the house. I know exactly where we are sitting. I went back downstairs. Terry was looking at his laptop screen with a frown. He wasn't looking at the guest list anymore. He was looking at the bank transfer details again. Violet, he said, his voice low. I got an alert. What kind of alert? I asked. I have a friend in the compliance department at the regional bank hub, Terry said. I asked him to run a quiet check on the routing number structure, just to confirm the dealership details. He just emailed me. He turned the screen toward me. The wire transfer wasn't coded as a personal gift or vehicle purchase on the sender's side, Terry explained. When Grant filled out the digital wire form, he had to select a category for the expense to get it past the automatic fraud filters for an account that size. What did he select? I asked. Terry pointed to a line of code. He selected medical durable goods / mobility assistance. I stared at the screen, blinking. Mobility assistance like a wheelchair van. Exactly, Terry said. He flagged the purchase of a luxury SUV as a medical necessity for Grandma. He probably justified it by saying it was to transport her. That is how he bypassed the daily transfer limit. He claimed it was for her care. But she's in hospice, I said. She isn't going anywhere. She is dying. He lied to the bank, Terry said, his eyes hard. That is wire fraud. Violet, it is not just stealing from Grandma. It is federal banking fraud. He lied about the purpose of the funds to expedite the theft. I sat down heavily on the chair. My parents weren't just greedy. They were criminally reckless. They had stacked felony upon felony forgery, elder abuse, and now wire fraud, all to buy a car that Sloane would use to drive to brunch. This isn't a family dispute, I whispered. This is a crime ring. And if you don't stop them, Terry said, you are an accessory. If you know this and you do nothing, you are letting them get away with it. I am not backing down, I said. I looked at the timeline Terry had built. I looked at the text from Malcolm. I looked at the dress waiting upstairs. For 34 years, I had been afraid of losing my family. I had swallowed their insults, accepted their crumbs, and apologized for taking up space. I had let them treat me like an extra in the movie of their lives. But looking at that fraud code on the screen, I realized something. I had already lost them. You cannot lose people who never saw you in the first place. You cannot lose a father who sees you as a bad investment. You cannot lose a mother who calls your boss to destroy your reputation. They were not my family. They were my adversaries. And tomorrow, I was going to walk into their house, eat their catering, and watch them burn. Get some sleep, Terry said. Closing the laptop. We have a big day. I can't sleep, I said. I keep thinking about Grandma, alone in that room while they hang banners. She isn't alone, Terry said. She has you, and tomorrow, everyone will know it. I went to the window and looked out at the dark street. The wind was picking up, rattling the dry leaves on the pavement. I touched the compass around my neck. Checkmate, Grandma had said. I turned away from the window. Let's go over the plan one more time, I said. I want to be sure. Okay, Terry said, opening the file again. We arrive at 2:15. We park on the street, not the driveway, so we can't be blocked in. We walk in. We say hello to the Ketters immediately to establish presence. We sit in the high-backed chairs near the fireplace, and when Grant taps his glass to speak. We wait for Malcolm, I finished. We wait for the end, Terry corrected. No, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. We wait for the beginning. We arrived at the house on Sycamore Drive at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. The street was lined with cars, a parade of Mercedes, Lexuses, and BMWs that made our bruised sedan look like a masterful error in parking validation. We parked 3 houses down, just as Terry had suggested, ensuring we had a clear exit route that could not be blocked by a caterer's van or a spiteful relative. I stepped out of the car and smoothed the fabric of my midnight blue dress. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning leaves and the faint, expensive aroma of roasting meat from the catering tent my parents had set up on the lawn. My heart was not racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy thud, like a war drum. I touched the compass pendant at my throat, feeling the cool metal against my skin. Ready? Terry asked, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the car window. He looked sharp, professional, and entirely out of place in the best way possible. Ready, I said. We walked up the driveway. The house my parents did not own. The house that belonged to the trust they were currently defrauding looked magnificent. The shutters were freshly painted. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life, and the cream-colored banner proclaiming a celebration of legacy fluttered gently in the breeze. It was a perfect stage set for a perfect lie. The front lawn was already crowded. My father, Grant Ross, was holding court near the entrance. He wore a tailored suit that I knew he had put on a credit card, a glass of champagne in one hand, and he was laughing a loud, booming sound that signaled to the world that he was a man of consequence. He was surrounded by a cluster of men in similar suits, business partners and local investors, whose respect he craved like a drug. I watched him clap a hand on the shoulder of a man I recognized as a local zoning commissioner. It is all about vision, Bob, Grant was saying, his voice carrying over the crowd. You have to know when to leverage your assets. My mother always taught me that. Bold moves yield bold returns. I almost choked. The only thing Grandma June had taught him about assets was to save them. A lesson he had spectacularly failed to learn. As we moved deeper into the crowd, I saw the guests of honor, the Ketter family. Miles Ketter stood near the punch bowl, looking bored and slightly terrified, tugging at his collar. His parents, heavy hitters in the county's real estate market, were listening intently to my mother. Lorna was in her element, wearing a pastel dress that screamed, approachable matriarch, gesturing with a canapé as if she were conducting an orchestra. Violet. The voice was shrill and demanding. I turned to see Sloane. She was standing next to the SUV. It was parked on the side lawn, positioned on a literal red carpet that must have been rented for the occasion. The car gleamed like a dark jewel, the midday sun bouncing off its polished black curves. Sloane was leaning against the hood, posing for a photographer she had hired, or perhaps bullied into service. Come here. Sloane waved me over, her smile bright and brittle. We need a sister shot for the album. The lighting is perfect right now. I walked over. Terry trailing a few steps behind like a silent bodyguard. Sloane hooked her arm through mine, pulling me close. She smelled of vanilla and entitlement. God, Violet, she hissed through her teeth, while maintaining a radiant smile for the camera. That dress is severe. You look like you are going to a funeral. Could you not have worn something lighter? This is a celebration. It is a celebration of Grandma's legacy, I said, looking straight into the lens. I thought gravitas was appropriate, given that she is currently dying alone in a hospital room 5 miles away. Sloane's grip on my arm tightened, her nails digging into my skin. Don't start, she whispered. Miles's mother is watching. Just smile and try not to look so bitter. It is not my fault Grandma wanted me to have a safe car. She pulled away and turned to the photographer. Did you get it? Make sure you crop it so the car emblem shows. I want the logo in the frame. She turned back to me, her eyes scanning my outfit with a sneer. By the way, Mom told me you are having trouble at work. Something about emotional outbursts. You really should take better care of yourself. Vi, maybe if you had a career that wasn't just charitable outreach, you would handle stress better. High stakes toughen you up. I looked at the car. I looked at the name Sloane Ross that I knew was etched into the dashboard. Paid for with the money, meant to save me from exactly this kind of condescension. You are right, Sloane, I said calmly. High stakes do reveal character. Enjoy the car. It is truly one of a kind. She missed the tone. She preened, smoothing her hair. I know. It is fully loaded. Dad said nothing was too good for the family face. I walked away before I vomited. Terry fell into step beside me as we moved toward the patio seating. Did you hear that? I murmured. The family face? I heard, Terry said. Keep walking. We need to find our seats. We found 2 high-backed wicker chairs near the stone fireplace in the center of the patio. It was the strategic position Malcolm had recommended central, visible, but not easily corralled toward the exit. From here, we had a view of the entire party. I watched Lorna working the room. She was moving from group to group, spreading her poison with the efficiency of a crop duster. I saw her lean in to speak to Mrs. Ketter, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic concern. I didn't need to guess what she was saying. I could hear snippets of it drifting over the ambient jazz music. It is so hard, Lorna was saying, touching her chest. Her mind is just gone. She confuses people. She gets paranoid. Yesterday she thought the nurses were stealing her silverware. We have had to take over everything just to protect her from herself. Thank God Grant has the legal authority to step in. Mrs. Baketter nodded sympathetically. It is a blessing she has you. Financial management for the elderly is such a burden. It is, Lorna sighed. But we do it for love. Just like this gift for Sloane. Mother kept saying, in her lucid moments, give Sloane the car. Give her the wings I can no longer use. It was poetic. Really. I gripped the arms of my chair. The wings I can no longer use. It was a lie so specific, so emotionally manipulative, that it made my stomach turn. They weren't just stealing her money. They were stealing her voice. They were putting words in the mouth of a dying woman to sanitize their greed. Easy, Terry whispered, his hand covering mine. Let them dig. They are just making the hole deeper. Terry's eyes were scanning the crowd, not listening to the gossip. He was looking at the suits. Suddenly, he stiffened. 3 o'clock, he said softly. By the bar. Blue tie. I looked. Standing by the bar, nursing a tonic water, was a man with thinning hair and a sharp, calculating face. He was looking at Grant, then at the car, then back at Grant. Who is he? I asked. That is David Eames, Terry said. He is the regional credit compliance officer for the bank where the wire transfer originated. I met him at a conference last year. Why is he here? Grant must have invited him, Terry surmised. Grant probably thinks knowing a bank officer makes him look connected, but look at Eames's face. He isn't drinking, and he keeps looking at me. I watched Eames. He locked eyes with Terry. There was a flicker of recognition. followed by a frown. He tilted his head, as if trying to place where he had seen Terry before. Then, his gaze shifted to the car, and then to Grant, who was currently laughing loudly at his own joke. Eames pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "He knows something is off," Terry said. "A compliance officer at a party where the host is flashing cash. He shouldn't have. Eames is doing math in his head right now." The music suddenly dipped in volume. Grant stepped up onto the raised hearth of the fireplace, tapping a spoon against his champagne glass. The sharp ding-ding-ding silenced the crowd. "Friends, family, honored guests," Grant began. Spreading his arms wide, he looked the picture of the benevolent patriarch. The sun caught the gold of his watch, another thing bought with credit. No doubt. "Thank you for coming today," Grant boomed. "We gather under a bit of a shadow. As you know, my beloved mother, June, is in her final days. But she made me promise one thing. She said, 'Grant, do not mourn me while I am still here. Celebrate the future.'" A murmur of approval went through the crowd. Lorna dabbed at a dry eye with a handkerchief. "And part of that future," Grant continued, gesturing grandly toward the black SUV, "is seeing the next generation thrive. My mother insisted. I tell you that we use a portion of her estate to ensure her granddaughter, Sloane, travels in safety and style. She wanted this car to be a symbol of the Ross legacy, a symbol that we take care of our own." The guests applauded. The Ketters looked impressed, nodding at each other. Sloane beamed, waving to the crowd like a pageant queen. "It is a substantial gift," Grant said, lowering his voice to a humbler register. "Paid for in full, because that is how the Ross family does business. We do not believe in debt. We believe in providing." I felt the bile rise in my throat. We do not believe in debt. The man was living in a stolen house, spending stolen money, standing on a foundation of lies so brittle a breeze could shatter it. "So let us raise a glass," Grant said, lifting his flute. "To June Caldwell, and to the bright future of Sloane and Well, all our children." He didn't look at me. He didn't even acknowledge I was in the room. The crowd drank. I did not. I set my glass on the stone floor. "Wait for it," Terry whispered. I looked toward the back of the patio. The gate to the side yard opened. It wasn't a dramatic entrance. There was no fanfare. Malcolm Price walked in. He was wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than my car. He carried a battered leather briefcase in one hand and a black folder in the other. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at the food. He walked with a slow, terrifying deliberation toward the edge of the patio, where the shadows of the oak trees were longest. He found a small iron bench in the corner, sat down, and placed the briefcase on his knees. He crossed his legs. He looked like a reaper who had arrived early for an appointment and was content to wait. Grant didn't see him. Lorna didn't see him. They were too busy basking in the applause. But I saw him, and I saw him catch my eye. He gave a microscopic nod. Not yet. Grant stepped down from the hearth, flushed with victory. He was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. I watched as a man in a beige suit, a property developer I recognized from the local paper, pulled Grant aside. Just a few feet from where I was sitting, they thought the noise of the party covered their voices. They didn't know I was listening with the intensity of a predator. "Great speech, Grant," the developer said, shaking his hand. "Classy gesture with the car." "Thank you, Bill," Grant said. His voice lowered. "It is all about liquidity, moving assets to the right columns." "Speaking of assets," the developer said, leaning in, "you mentioned on the phone that you were ready to move on the Sycamore property. The market is hot right now." My breath hitched. The Sycamore property. This house. "Absolutely," Grant said, glancing around to make sure Lorna wasn't listening. "I want to fast-track it. I am looking to liquidate the house by the end of the month. I have a verbal agreement with a buyer in Raleigh, but if you can beat the offer, it is yours. Cash out. Clean break. We are looking to downsize to a condo downtown now that Mom is transitioning." "And the deed is clean?" the developer asked. Clean as a whistle. Grant lied smoothly. I have full authority. We can sign the intent to sell next week. I just need to get the old lady's signature on one last form. But well, my hand guides hers, if you know what I mean. He winked. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just stealing the savings. They weren't just living rent-free. Grant was actively arranging to sell Grandma June's house, the house she loved, the house she wanted to keep in the trust out from under her before she was even cold in the ground. And he was going to forge her signature again to do it. He was going to sell the roof over his own head for a quick cash infusion, assuming he could take the money and run before anyone noticed the title issues. I looked at Terry. He had heard it too. His face was pale. "They are selling the house," I whispered, my voice trembling with a rage so pure it felt like ice. "He is trying to flip the house next week." "That is the line," Terry said. "That is the absolute line." I looked across the patio at Malcolm Price. He was still sitting on the bench, watching Grant with the detached interest of a biologist observing a doomed specimen. Grant turned away from the developer. Looking satisfied, he raised his glass again, scanning the crowd, hungry for more adoration. His eyes finally landed on me. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a smirk of total dominance. He raised his glass to me slightly, a silent toast that said, "I won." "You lost. Deal with it." He thought I was sitting there in defeat. He thought I was the quiet, plain daughter who would swallow the injustice to keep the peace. I stood up. Terry stood up with me. Grant's smile faltered for a second. He saw something in my face he hadn't seen before. He saw the armor. I didn't walk toward the exit. I turned my body toward the corner of the patio. I looked directly at Malcolm Price, and I nodded. Grant raised his glass for a second toast. His face flushed with the intoxication of his own lie. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to invent another heartwarming anecdote about how Grandma June had begged him to take the helm of the family fortune. "Mr. Ross," a voice cut through the humid afternoon air. It was not loud, but it had the timbre of a closing jail cell door. "I believe you have misstated the nature of the legacy you are celebrating." The silence that followed was instant and absolute. The chatter died. The clinking of silverware stopped. 50 heads turned toward the corner of the patio. Malcolm Price stood up from the iron bench. He picked up his briefcase and walked into the center of the gathering. He did not look like a guest. He looked like an event. He stopped 3 feet from Grant, ignoring the hand my father instinctively, and foolishly extended. "Malcolm," Grant said, his smile wavering, but not yet breaking. "I did not realize you had arrived. Everyone, this is Malcolm Price, an old family associate. Malcolm, we were just toasting." "I am not here to toast, Grant," Malcolm said. He placed his briefcase on a high cocktail table, right next to a tray of untouched crab cakes. He clicked the latches open. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet yard. "I am here in my capacity as the retained legal counsel for the June Caldwell Living Trust, and I am here to correct the record regarding the ownership of the assets you are currently displaying." "This is hardly the time," Lorna hissed, stepping forward, her face tight with panic. "We have guests. Malcolm, if you have business, call the office on Monday." "The business cannot wait until Monday," Malcolm said, pulling a sheaf of documents from the case. "Because as of 9 o'clock this morning, the business has been frozen." He held up a document, turning it so the guests, specifically the Ketter family and the property developer Grant had just propositioned, could see the header. "This is the deed to the property located at 12 Sycamore Drive," Malcolm announced. His voice was calm, factual, and devastating. "Contrary to the impression given by your host today, Grant and Lorna Ross do not own this home. They never have. The title is held exclusively by the June Caldwell Trust. Mr. and Mrs. Ross reside here as tenants at will, a courtesy extended by Mrs. Caldwell 2 decades ago. A courtesy." Malcolm paused, looking Grant dead in the eye. "That can be revoked at any moment." A gasp rippled through the crowd. I saw the property developer, Bill, take a step back, his face draining of color. He looked at Grant with the expression of a man who realizes He almost bought a bridge from a con artist. That is a technicality, Grant sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. It is a family structure for tax purposes. I have full administrative control. You have no control, Malcolm corrected him. Not anymore. Article 7 of the trust was activated this morning. Your status as a successor trustee has been suspended due to evidence of financial malfeasance. Malfeasance, Mrs. Ketter repeated the word, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. Grant, what is he talking about? Malcolm didn't let Grant answer. He pulled out a second document, the transaction log Terry and I had uncovered. I am referring to the unauthorized wire transfer of $48,500 from Mrs. Caldwell's personal savings account 3 days ago. Malcolm said. He pointed a long finger at the gleaming black SUV parked on the lawn. Funds that were used to purchase that vehicle, funds that were explicitly designated for another beneficiary. Sloane dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the stone patio, sending shards of crystal skittering across the floor. She looked at the car, then at her boyfriend, Miles. Daddy, Sloane whispered, you said Grandma signed off on it. You said it was a gift. It was, Grant shouted, his composure finally snapping. She is confused, Malcolm. You are twisting this. Mom is not lucid. She doesn't know what she is saying. I had to make executive decisions to protect the estate. Is that so? Malcolm asked. Because I spoke to June this morning. She seemed quite clear when she instructed me to recover the stolen funds. She was also quite clear that the power of attorney you filed with the hospital was never intended to authorize the purchase of luxury goods. Malcolm turned to the crowd, addressing them like a jury. The document Mr. Ross used to access the funds is a limited power of attorney for health care. Using it for self-enrichment is not executive decision-making. It is a violation of fiduciary duty, and in the state of North Carolina, it is a crime. The atmosphere in the garden shifted from confusion to repulsion. The guests began to back away, creating a physical gap between themselves and my parents. It was a social quarantine happening in real time. Mr. Ketter, Miles's father, stepped forward. He was a large man with a red face, and right now, he looked furious. He grabbed his son by the arm. Miles, Mr. Ketter barked. Get in the car. We are leaving. But Dad, Miles stammered, looking at Sloane, who was now trembling. I said, get in the car. Mr. Ketter snapped. He turned to Grant. Do not contact my office again. Grant, and if my son's name is on any paperwork for that stolen vehicle, my lawyers will eat you alive. Bob, wait, Grant pleaded, reaching out. It is a misunderstanding. It is just a liquidity issue. I can explain. Mr. Ketter swatted Grant's hand away as if it were a fly. You don't own the house. You are throwing parties on credit. You are a fraud. Grant, a total fraud. The Ketters marched out. The exit triggered a stampede. The zoning commissioner, the bankers, the neighbors, they all started moving toward the driveway, eyes averted, mumbling excuses. No one wanted to be a witness to the collapse. They just wanted to escape the blast radius. Grant watched them go, his face twisting into a mask of pure, ugly rage. He needed a target. He needed someone to blame for the fact that his carefully constructed facade had just been incinerated. He turned to me. You, he snarled, pointing a shaking finger. This is you. You did this. You couldn't stand to see Sloane happy. Could you? You were always jealous. You poisoned Mom against me. He took a step toward me, his hands balled into fists. You brought this vulture here. You and that pathetic husband of yours. You manipulated a dying woman to humiliate me in my own house. It is not your house. Grant, Malcolm reminded him calmly. Shut up, Grant screamed, spinning back to me. You think you are so righteous, Violet. You think you are the good daughter. You are killing her. You are stressing her out with this drama if she dies tonight. It is on your head. You are the reason she is suffering. Lorna joined in, her voice shrill and hysterical. She is unstable. I told everyone. She is having a breakdown and dragging us all down with her. Violet. Look what you have done. You have destroyed this family." I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. I felt Terry step up beside me. His presence a solid wall of support, but I didn't need him to fight this for me. "I didn't destroy anything," I said, my voice steady enough to cut through their screaming. "I just turned on the lights." "She is lying," Lorna shrieked to the few remaining guests. "She is mentally ill. She threatened me. She—" "Stop," Malcolm said. He didn't shout. He just pressed a button on the small digital recorder he had placed on the table. The sound of static filled the air, followed by a voice that everyone in the room recognized. It was Lorna's voice, recorded from my phone call with her days ago. Malcolm must have obtained the file from Terry. "If you go in there and start wailing about money and cars," the recording of Lorna hissed, cruel and venomous, "if you upset her, you will kill her. Do you want that on your conscience? Violet, do you want to be the one who pushes her over the edge?" Then Grant's voice joined in. "If she dies 10 minutes after you speak to her, that is on you, not us. You." Malcolm clicked the device off. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't shocked. It was disgusted. The few remaining guests, the caterers, the photographer, a couple of neighbors who had lingered, looked at my parents with absolute revulsion. The recording stripped away the caring family mask and revealed the emotional blackmail underneath. "That," Malcolm said, "is not the sound of a loving son and daughter-in-law. That is the sound of coercion." Grant looked around the emptying yard. He was panting, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild. He realized the audience was gone. The admiration was gone. All that was left was the wreckage. But Malcolm wasn't finished. He had one final blow to deliver. He turned to the property developer, Bill, who was hovering near the gate, looking like he wanted to ask for his business card back. "Mr. Henderson," Malcolm said to the developer, "I believe you were discussing a transaction with Mr. Ross earlier, something about fast-tracking the sale of this property." Bill Henderson cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Yes, there was a mention of it. You should know," Malcolm said, looking back at Grant, "that Mr. Ross attempted to use this property which he does not own as collateral for a business loan 3 months ago. The bank rejected it when the title search failed. Offering to sell a property you do not hold title to and soliciting a cash offer based on that misrepresentation constitutes attempted real estate fraud." Grant went white. "I was going to get the signature. I was going to fix it." By guiding her hand, Malcolm quoted Grant's own words from 10 minutes ago. "That is not fixing it. Grant, that is forgery." And now that the trust is active, any attempt to sell this house will be met with an immediate criminal referral. Malcolm closed his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like the final nail. "The party is over," Malcolm said. "I suggest you return the vehicle to the dealership immediately, before the police are involved, and I suggest you start looking for a new place to live. The trust will be issuing a notice to vacate within 30 days. Grant sank into one of the gold-painted chairs. He looked small, defeated. The arrogance that had fueled him for decades had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, frightened man. Lorna was sobbing quietly near the punch bowl, not for the crime, but for the humiliation. Sloane was sitting on the bumper of the car, scrolling through her phone, frantically deleting posts. It was over. We had won. The truth was out. The money was frozen, and the power dynamic had shifted permanently. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt a surge of joy. But as I looked at my broken, venal family, all I felt was a profound, exhausting sadness. They had chosen a car over a daughter. They had chosen status over their own mother. I turned to Terry. "Let's go." Terry nodded, taking my arm. We turned to walk away, leaving the ruins of the party behind us. But before we could reach the driveway, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was a call. I pulled it out of my purse. The screen said, "Blue Ridge Haven." My heart stopped. The war drum in my chest skipped a beat. I answered it, my hand shaking for the first time all day. "Hello, Mrs. Bridges." It was Brenda, the nurse. Her voice was tight, urgent. It lacked the calm professionalism of the morning. "You need to come, now." "What is it?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Is she—" "She has taken a turn," Brenda said. "Her vitals are dropping rapidly. She is fading. Violet, but she is asking for you. She keeps saying your name. She is holding on, but I don't know for how long." I lowered the phone. The world narrowed down to a single point: the victory at the party, the frozen accounts, the humiliated parents. None of it mattered. "Violet?" Terry asked, seeing my face. "She's dying," I whispered. "She's asking for me." I looked back at the patio. Grant was staring at the ground. Lorna was wiping her eyes. They didn't know. They were too busy mourning their social standing to know that the woman they had exploited was taking her final breaths. I had a choice. I could stay here and ensure the destruction was complete. I could stand over them and make sure they understood the magnitude of their failure. I could force them to admit what they had done, or I could leave. I could leave them in the wreckage of their own making and go to the only person who had ever loved me without condition. "Go," Terry said, reading my mind. "Run. I'll drive." "No," I said, gripping his hand. "You stay. Make sure Malcolm gets to his car safely. Make sure they don't touch anything." "I will," Terry promised. "Go to her." I kicked off my high heels, leaving them on the driveway of the house that wasn't ours. I ran barefoot to my car, the gravel digging into my skin, the physical pain grounding me. I started the engine, the roar of the old sedan drowning out the distant sound of Lorna's weeping. I drove. I drove faster than I had ever driven in my life, tearing through the streets of Cedar Hollow, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Wait for me, Grandma," I pleaded. "Just wait. Don't go yet. We won. You have to know we won." But as I merged onto the highway, the sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the road, and I knew, with a terrible, sinking certainty, that the hardest part of the story wasn't the fight, it was the goodbye. I burst through the double doors of the hospice wing, my bare feet slapping against the cold linoleum. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape from the party was fading, replaced by a terrified, hollow ache in my chest. I wasn't the woman in the midnight blue armor anymore. I was just a granddaughter running out of time. Brenda, the nurse, was waiting by the door of room 304. She didn't speak. She just opened the door and stepped aside. I walked in. The room was dim, the blinds drawn against the dying light of the afternoon. The monitor was beeping, but the rhythm was slower, weaker than before. Grandma June lay in the bed, her body seeming to have shrunk in the hours since I last saw her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and labored. I collapsed into the chair beside the bed and took her hand. It was cold. "Grandma," I whispered. "I'm here. I did it. We stopped them." Her eyelids fluttered. It took a visible effort for her to open them, but when she did, that familiar spark of steel was still there, though dim. She turned her head slightly, focusing on my face. "Violet," she breathed. Her voice was a whisper, a dry rustle like autumn leaves. "You look fierce." "I had to be," I said, tears spilling over. "I wore the dress. I stood up to him." Malcolm told them everything. The house, the money, the trust. "They are finished, Grandma. They can't hurt you anymore." She squeezed my hand, a faint pressure. "Not just for me," she murmured. "For you. I needed to know you could do it." The door opened behind me. I turned to see Terry and Malcolm Price walk in. They looked grave. Terry was carrying my heels in his hand, a strange, domestic detail in the middle of a tragedy. He came over and put a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. Malcolm stood at the foot of the bed, his face softened from the legal shark I had seen an hour ago into something more reverent. "June," Malcolm said softly, "it is done. The accounts are locked. The guests have dispersed. Grant understands the position he is in." Grandma nodded, a small motion. Good. She looked at me, her gaze sharpening. Violet, listen to me. I do not have much breath left, so listen. I'm listening, I promised. I knew, she said. 3 years ago, I went to the bank to check my safe deposit box. The manager told me Grant had been in, asking questions, asking how to legally restructure an account if the owner was incapacitated. I gasped. 3 years ago, he was planning this that long. He plays the long game, she whispered. But so do I. I knew if I confronted him, then he would lie. He would gaslight, and you were not ready. You were still trying to please them. She paused to breathe, the sound rattling in her chest. I had to wait, she continued. I had to let him show his hand. I had to let him reach for the money so you could see him clearly. I am sorry I had to use you as bait, but I needed you to snap the trap. You saved me, I said, realizing the magnitude of her protection. She hadn't just secured the money. She had orchestrated a scenario to cure me of my need for their validation. Now, Grandma said, looking at Malcolm. The end game. I do not want vengeance. Violet, I do not want you to become them. Do not win by being cruel. Malcolm stepped forward. Violet, as the primary beneficiary and now the acting voice for the trust, you have a decision to make regarding the settlement. We can press criminal charges. We have enough for grand larceny, forgery, and elder abuse. We can send Grant to prison. We can evict them tomorrow morning. I looked at Grandma. She was watching me, waiting to see what version of myself would emerge. Or, I asked. Or, Malcolm said, we offer a conditional settlement. They return every cent of the $48,500. They surrender the vehicle. They vacate the house on a strict timeline. And in exchange, we do not file the police report. We keep it civil. But we cut them off. I thought about Grant screaming at me in the garden. I thought about Lorna's voice on the tape. I thought about the years of being told I was plain, useless, a bad investment, a part of me the angry part. The hurt part wanted to see them in handcuffs. I wanted to see them humiliated in the back of a squad car. But then I looked at Grandma's face. Do not win by being cruel. No prison, I said slowly. Prison gives them a martyrdom story. They will tell everyone they were persecuted. They will play the victim for the rest of their lives. I stood up, the clarity returning. I want the money back, I said to Malcolm. All of it. The car goes back to the dealership. If there is a loss on the return, Miles Ketter or Grant pays the difference, not the trust. Agreed, Malcolm said. They have 30 days to move out of the house. I continued. That is standard. I won't throw them on the street tonight. But on day 31, the locks change. And the contact? Malcolm asked. The trust usually stipulates a no-contact order for assets. Permanent, I said. They are removed from the will. They are removed from the insurance. They never touch a dime of Grandma's legacy again. But, I added, a new idea forming, something that felt like true justice. I want one more condition, a moral interest clause. Malcolm cocked his head. Explain. They stole from my future to buy a status symbol. I said, so, for the next 5 years, Grant and Lorna must contribute $200 a month, a small amount, something they can afford even when they are poor, to a community fund at Riverton Arts Outreach, a fund for students who can't afford instruments. You want them to donate? Terry asked, surprised. I want them to pay a bill that benefits someone else, I said. Every month, I want them to write that check and remember that money isn't for showing off. It is for helping, if they miss a payment. We file the criminal charges. Grandma June let out a sound that might have been a laugh, a weak, wheezing, delightful sound. Perfect, she whispered. That is perfect. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was Sloan. I looked at the screen, then at Grandma. Answer it, Grandma whispered. Close the door. I swiped the green button. Sloan? V.I. Sloan's voice was frantic, thick with tears. Oh my God. Vi, you have to help me. Miles broke up with me. His dad made him block my number in the car. They are saying I'm liable for the car depreciation. They are talking about suing me." "That sounds stressful," I said, my voice flat. "You have to tell them," she sobbed. "Tell Malcolm I didn't know. I didn't know Dad stole the money. I thought it was a gift. You know I wouldn't have done that if I knew. Right? We are sisters. VI." I closed my eyes. Even now, she was making it about her innocence, her victimization. "Sloan," I said, "you saw the car. You saw the engraving. You knew Dad didn't have $50,000 lying around. You chose not to ask questions because you liked the answer. Ignorance isn't a defense when you are benefiting from the crime." "But I have nowhere to go," she wailed. "If Mom and Dad lose the house, where am I going to live? I can't live in a rental. Vi, I have an image." "Then get a job," I said. "A real one. Sell your designer bags. Figure it out." "How can you be so cold?" she cried. "I'm your sister." "I am not being cold," I said. "I am being sturdy. You always look down on me for being the sturdy one. Sloan, well, now you have to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. If you want to rebuild your life, do it. But do not call me for money. Do not call me to fix it. I am not your safety net anymore." I hung up. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. The boundary was set in stone. I put the phone away and turned back to the bed. Grandma's eyes were half closed now. Her breathing was spacing out, long pauses between each inhale. "She is gone," I told Grandma gently. "I handled it." "I heard," Grandma whispered. Her hand twitched in mine. "Proud." She took a ragged breath. The room seemed to shrink down to just the 2 of us. Terry and Malcolm faded into the background. "Violet," she said, her voice barely a vibration in the air. "Money is just paper, just a tool. The real legacy is that you dared to stand straight." She looked at me one last time, her eyes finding mine with a final, desperate intensity. "Do not slouch anymore." "I won't," I promised, squeezing her hand with both of mine. "I'm standing tall. Grandma, look at me. I'm standing tall." She smiled. It was a small, fleeting thing, but it was real. And then she exhaled, a long, slow breath that carried 79 years of strength, disappointment, love, and planning. She didn't inhale again. The monitor let out a long, continuous tone. Beep! I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I leaned forward and kissed her forehead. It was still warm. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for the door." Malcolm stepped forward and gently turned off the machine. The silence that rushed in wasn't empty. It was full. It was finished. Epilogue. 6 months later. The autumn leaves in Cedar Hollow had turned to the dull gray of winter. But my life felt brighter than it ever had in the summer. I sat in my office at Riverton Arts Outreach. On my desk sat a photograph of Grandma June. The one where she is laughing at a picnic, holding a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have. Next to it was a file labeled the June Caldwell Musical Scholarship. We had used the recovered funds, every penny of the $48,500 to seed the program. It provided instruments and lessons for 20 kids in the county who had talent but no means. Every time I heard a student practice a scale in the hallway, I heard Grandma's voice. The house on Sycamore Drive was sold 3 months ago. The trust liquidated it, and the proceeds were placed into a protected investment account for my future children. Just as Grandma had specified in the original documents Malcolm uncovered, Grant and Lorna moved into a 2-bedroom apartment complex on the other side of the highway. It is a perfectly adequate place, clean and functional, but it has no pillars, no guest house, and no prestige. They stopped going to the country club because they could no longer afford the dues. And interestingly, once the money vanished, so did their friends. They live a quiet, small life now, every month, on the 1st. A check for $200 arrives at my office. It is always signed by Grant. The signature is shaky, but this time, it is real. Sloan had the hardest fall. The engagement to Miles ended 20 minutes after they left the party. The Ketters wanted nothing to do with the scandal. She tried to crash on friends' couches for a while, but her welcome wore thin when she couldn't pay for takeout. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist at a dental office in Raleigh and seeing a therapist. She sent me a text on my birthday. Just happy birthday. Vi, I replied. Thank you. That was enough. I drove home that evening in a new car. It wasn't a luxury SUV. It was a reliable, practical hybrid with excellent safety ratings. It didn't have my name engraved on the dashboard. It didn't need to. I knew who I was. I pulled into the driveway of the townhouse I shared with Terry. He was in the kitchen, making dinner. The smell of roasting chicken and thyme drifted out to meet me, just like it had on the night everything changed. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked out the door that night. I wasn't afraid of the phone ringing. I wasn't afraid of my reflection. I walked inside and kissed my husband. How was your day? He asked. It was good, I said. We awarded 3 violins today. Grandma would love that, Terry said. She would. I agreed. I touched the compass pendant at my neck. I had won the war, but not because I destroyed my parents. I didn't win because they were miserable. I won because their misery no longer had the power to make me miserable. They were just people now, flawed, sad, distant people who used to know me. I had walked through the door Grandma opened, and I had closed it gently, firmly, behind me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far Grandma June's legacy has traveled. If you enjoyed Violet's journey, please subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people who might need a reminder to stand tall. See you in the next story.